But there was a moment in time there where we're thinking, well, should we, focus exclusively on telehealth? Like, we had the opportunity to do that. We hadn't signed a lease, right? We could theoretically have done that. I think we really thought long and hard about, our population and their needs, and decided to, continue on with the center base, but have, more supplemental telehealth where needed. Ultimately, autism, one of the biggest deficits of autism is the social aspects of it. And, not having an in-person connection with therapists and the ability to meet other children and socialize with other people in person, we feel is really not going to allow the children to get up the curve and really catch them up to their neurotypical development peers.
Hey, it's Josh. Before we get started with this episode, I just want to ask that if you're listening, please subscribe in your podcast app so you'll get notifications when new episodes come out. And if you like this episode, share it with a friend and maybe leave a review. It will really help us out. Okay, enjoy the episode.
Breaking news tonight, the coronavirus forcing millions more Americans into virtual lockdown.
Our country wasn't built to be shut down. This is not a country that was built for this. It was not built to be shut down. America will again and soon be open for business, very soon, a lot sooner than 3 or 4 months.
There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, wondering if you're risking your life by going to work.
Welcome to Restarting America. I am Jeremy Greenberg, and I'm excited to interview Brad Zellinger, the founder and CEO of Stride Autism Centers. Brad was inspired to find Stride Autism Centers by his adult sister who has severe ASD-related disorder called Rett syndrome. He is personally and professionally dedicated to supporting individuals with complex needs. Brad began his career in investment banking at Moelis & Company in New York. Before founding Stride, he was a private equity investor at Madison Dearborn Partners TZB Group, where he evaluated, executed, and oversaw investment in growth-oriented companies. Brad earned an MBA from Harvard Business School and a BBA with high distinction from University of Michigan Ross School of Business. He serves on the board of Rett Syndrome Research Trust and Asper Tech, and a treasurer of the Illinois Association of Behavior Analysis. Thank you, Brad, for being here today. So, Brad, clearly you've had a lot of success in building up your career in the financial services and going to Harvard and having this great financial backing of business. Why did you decide to change gears?
Yeah, I think I definitely was on this structured career path in the finance world. I really dedicated myself, academically and professionally to kind of moving up in that area. And it was something that, I really was excited about. But, I really had an insight a couple of years ago when I decided to make this change that, I wasn't really converging my two primary identities as a person. I had this identity on the business side that I was working towards, and I had this other identity of being, the sibling to someone with the severe autism disorder, as you mentioned. And, I wasn't really bringing those two things together, and there was actually a way to go and do that. And as soon as I kind of realized that was an opportunity, that's when I realized I was on the wrong path and I needed to make a change. So, as mentioned, my sister has an autism-related disorder. It's called Rett syndrome, and it really has impacted my worldview. It's impacted my entire family's experience, really, really meaningfully. The sort of supports that she needs on a daily basis are fairly significant. And, I think when you just grow up with something like that and see the struggles that she faced and see kind of how our entire family had to come together in order to sort of realize her full potential and to ensure that she had a joyous and as independent a life as possible, it just makes a really strong influence on how you look at things. And, that had led us to obviously A, support her directly, but B, try to give back to the community. So we were involved in lots of nonprofits. I serve on the board of Rett Syndrome Research Trust, another board called the Spirit Tech, and some other nonprofit related things. So this was a huge part of my life and identity. And so there was a moment, again, 2 years ago, where a friend of mine had told me about this book. It was called Autism Matters. And it was written by a founder of a company very much like the one that I've most recently founded, which really helped children with autism develop communication skills, social skills, and address, behavioral challenges that they face in order to lead more joyous and independent lives. And it talked about how there was a huge need for services like that. It discussed the ways in which you could deliver those services in a very high quality fashion, and how there was a distinction between low quality and high quality providers. And it was really ending with a call to action around building more services and more capacity for these services throughout the country. And in reading that, it was just this massive aha moment of, wow, I have this business background. I've been working, trying to help growth companies expand and scale and all of that as part of what I do professionally. And here's this opportunity to take that and apply it directly to something that's so super close to home that will make an enormous difference, if I succeed at it. And so, just in seeing that opportunity, that's when I realized that I was on the wrong path and needed to just correct my course and give this a shot. And so that's where really Stride Autism Centers, which is what I'm working on now, that's where it all came from.
So tell me, what was the first step then when you realized this is what I got to do? What does that mean? Like, where do you start from there?
Yeah. So I took kind of an approach that I guess was trained to do in the investing career path that I was on. So, oftentimes when we're getting up to speed on a particular industry or some niche that we have no knowledge about, in this case, obviously I had some personal knowledge of what therapies were like because my sister has seen, 50 different therapists throughout her life. But, the intricacies of that, I didn't fully understand, what it takes to be a great clinician and all of the things that go into a really, top drawer therapeutic program. So I started with what we do in any moment like that in investing, which is expert calls. So, I got on the phone with people all across the country that held academic roles at different schools, everywhere from University of Southern California to Northwestern to University of Pennsylvania, and all in between, and really ask them questions around, what makes a great clinician, what types of therapies work, what models work best, what does the research and evidence say, is going to be the best type of program. And I tried to piece together, what I wanted to build and or if I wasn't going to build it and I was going to maybe buy it, what were the types of things I wanted to look for in a practice if I was going to, make an acquisition. And that really just informed having all those conversations and, digesting all of that was really what led me to understand what it is I was either going to look for or build. And then ultimately, decided to build on my own.
What has been then like the biggest challenge then since you've been starting out and getting this off the ground?
Yeah. So when you're starting a clinical business and you're not a clinician, I think the hardest part is like, first understanding what it is. That whole research process that I did up front, I think was a really, I'll say, maybe that wasn't the most difficult thing, but that is a challenging thing, is to really deeply understand those aspects that, generally, if you're a clinician, you're spending years and years developing and honing as part of your training. So I had to sort of, do my best to understand all that stuff without going through that training. So that, I think, is, one of the big challenges of this. The other thing was, this is all about the people. So, delivering a high standard of care means that you're bringing in someone with great training and background, who's, mission driven, really eager to learn and grow, and has all of these soft attributes in terms of being able to connect and develop rapport with families and children and all that. So the next biggest challenge was finding the right people to bring onto the team, and not necessarily being able to evaluate their clinical quality, because I'm not a clinician myself. So that first piece of like, who are we going to bring on as our clinical director, who's going to oversee the work that we do across our locations, and who's going to mentor and support our staff. That was a really challenging decision. And then who are we going to bring on that would, other licensed professionals that we would bring on, underneath that individual. That was another huge challenge of, who are we going to bring onto this team to set this up for success. I think those two things were really the most challenging aspects of getting this going.
I could see that. Thank you for sharing. So, as you've told me, this business is it's been evolving, and it's been evolving probably during the pandemic. Kind of talk to me about it before the pandemic, what that was like for you, what stages you were there like at before the pandemic, and then we can talk about how that's shaped you.
Yeah. So really, the process began with an intensive research project, if you will. Really, my goal was to understand deeply, what do quality services for young children with autism, what does that look like? How do you deliver that? And what needs are unmet today? And how can we create something that is just exceeding the standards of care that are out there? And so I really met with people from all over the country, frankly, over the phone or virtually, what have you, or in person. At that time, you still could have meetings in person back in the day. And so, at conferences, I went to a variety of conferences across the country as well, and really tried to absorb as much knowledge as I could. So I met, the average person I was speaking to was an academic person that did research in the autism area. And I would pepper them with questions, trying to understand these things. And coming out of that, I had kind of a basic model for what I wanted to do. And then it was about finding a team to execute on that. So, being a business person and not a clinician, like I don't have the licenses and certifications to provide the care directly and carry a caseload, I needed to bring on a team that was aligned with that mission and model that I had decided, made the most sense, and bring that to fruition. And so, and again, this is a human services company. It's so important that you bring the right people in to ensure that you have a high standard of care. And so I spent a very long time recruiting. So I interviewed and talked to many, many people, and ultimately decided on, we decided, it wasn't just me, but to bring on a really outstanding clinical director who was going to be clinical leader in our organization and oversee all of the other licensed professionals that we bring on to our team. And so her name is Dr. Ashley Whittington Barnish. She's the University Chair of ABA at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, one of the largest programs here in Illinois and across the country that prepares people for a career in this field of ABA and gets them prepared to get their BCBA, which is the certification that is most relevant to what we do. And that was the first major decision point. After interviewing lots and lots of people, she came on board. And that happened prior to COVID. And it was just after that we were starting to, seek other people to come into the organization that would kind of, report to her and report to me. That COVID happened. And so basically, every milestone from that initial, major hire onward has been during the pandemic.
So then talk about that. So what was it like back in March when you start thinking places are closing? Where were you at the stage of finding your first location? And what was the initial conversations with that doctor like, and kind of how you went from there?
I think there were a lot of questions at that time of like, how can we have this unique opportunity to curate our program to the new normal and to make sure that what we do is effective in this new world, because we hadn't signed a lease, we hadn't brought any other team members, we hadn't completely developed every protocol that we needed. So we were able to build this with that in mind, which I think was really helpful. I hate to say that, that it was like, it helped us. It did. I mean, COVID certainly hasn't helped us, but in a way we were allowed, the fact that we hadn't, done a tremendous amount of investing in building Stride prior to the pandemic meant that we could just be more nimble, right? And we could curate the organization for the situation. So yeah, I think that was an interesting time for us. But I think some of what we were worried about a little bit was, does this completely turn our model on its head? Like, we had been really focused on like center-based services being the most effective. Oftentimes, so there's kind of two models, or now three models of service delivery. There's in the client's home, there's in a center, which is like a piece of real estate where, children come to your space and get treatment and therapy, or there's telehealth. Prior to the pandemic, telehealth was a very small amount of the total mix across all providers. But there was a moment in time there where we're thinking, well, should we, focus exclusively on telehealth? Like, we had the opportunity to do that. We hadn't signed a lease, right? We could theoretically have done that. I think we really thought long and hard about, our population and their needs, and decided to, continue on with the center base, but have, more supplemental telehealth where needed. Ultimately, like, autism, one of the biggest deficits of autism is the social aspects of it. And, not having an in-person connection with therapists and the ability to meet other children and socialize with other people in person, we feel is really not going to allow the children to get up the curve and really catch them up to their neurotypical development peers. And so we've continued on with the center-based model, although we've made some tweaks to the center and the way that we do things to mitigate against the pandemic and the spread of COVID within our centers.
So tell me what the centers look like now.
Yeah, so, basically each center has a mix of both private individualized treatment rooms and open space. The open space is space that kids can have kind of more naturalistic treatment, where they can, cruise around on a tricycle or go down a slide or just, kind of play and have more fun. Versus the treatment rooms, which is not void of fun, but those are environments where there are fewer distractions. Kids can really focus on learning a specific skill that they really need to acquire, such as something communications related, learning how to express themselves, learning how to respond to their name and things like this. They're obviously really important to independence, but doing so in like a more individualized room. So, but now, because of COVID, we're distanced. We have these big open spaces in the center of our centers, and there's a lot more distancing that is happening in those areas. So, there's a lot, like, really, it's unfortunate that we can't have as much socialization as we'd like, but we're kind of distancing in those areas and making sure that that we're mitigating against the risk of spreading COVID.
So is there a capacity limit that you're worried about compared to what you normally can do, or is it the same as normal?
Yeah, we definitely have limited that. So, each treatment room, is large enough for multiple kids to be in, but we are not doing that. So, we're limiting each room to one child. We have some classrooms that are much larger, maybe 3 times the size of a treatment room. In those rooms, we've considered having multiple kids, but right now, we're keeping every room to just one kid and one therapist. And that big open space, you can have multiple people. It's a pretty large centralized space. But yeah, it's definitely impacted that, and having because every child has one therapist that's working with them. It's this 1-to-1 ratio. So having 4 people in a room that's small would not make sense during COVID. So that's a good point, and we've kind of limited our capacity during this time as well.
So talk about some of the milestones that you've been able to achieve during COVID. I know you mentioned that you've been able to, majority of milestones besides your big first hire was after COVID started.
Yeah. I mean, we hired on some really key team members. So our team has grown a lot. We have now, 2 additional clinicians, one in the Des Moines, Iowa area and one in Chicago. Fantastic leaders of the respective markets, and also have hired a number of therapists that those clinicians oversee as well. And so we've built out these teams, and I think a really awesome culture. We brought on about 10 clients now already in the Des Moines area, and hope to bring on some additional clients in the new year. And we've opened up 2 locations during this time as well, which included doing construction and renovation and those types of things. So a lot has been built during this time, and just coming back to where this all began and what this is about. Our mission is to provide just the highest standard of care as possible to children and families impacted by autism, and we continue to do that, and we're definitely growing and increasing the number of families that we're going to be able to impact positively. And I think it's just really exciting that we've been able to see really Stride bring that mission to life already in a great way in the Des Moines area, and we're excited to get that going in Chicago as well pretty soon.
So tell me about what has been potentially the biggest challenge for you, either personally or for the business, or both.
Yeah.
During COVID.
Yeah. I think, I think there are 2 buckets. There's the client side and then there's the staff side. So I think, clients are kind of weighing the risks of, contracting COVID and bring that into their household. Even though we're doing everything we can to prevent it, there's a risk, of course, of that happening by sending your child to a therapy center. They're weighing that risk with the risk of, if my child, and we serve children ages 2 to 6, if my child who has autism does not get treatment during this critical window of their life, because as you're younger, like, you just have more plasticity in your behaviors, and the earlier you intervene, the better chance you have of really bridging that gap between your child with autism and a neurotypical child. And so they're saying, well, I'm weighing that risk of COVID versus the risk of no treatment. And I think in the beginning, people were thinking, maybe we can push this off. But it got to a point now where we're almost a year into COVID, and I think families are saying, look, I think we really, like, my child is just not getting the support they need in the home. They're not getting it at school. They're not, whatever virtual program they're having is not cutting it. And so they're deciding to make this, to enroll in a program like ours. But I think one of the biggest challenges was kind of like, it's really for our families is what do we do right now? And I think so we've had, talk to families about this and kind of help them evaluate that and, help them through some of that decision making. The other thing I mentioned is, a huge part, one of the biggest deficits of autism is social skills. And it's core to the treatment program that we have. And so how do you improve those social skills when it's COVID and you can't interact with other people the way you'd want? So that's a big challenge too, is like trying to find moments where we can approximate that, where we've talked about as a team, using, having kids in different rooms and using iPads to connect with children in different rooms so you could at least see each other, connect that way, or do things distanced, but that's not as natural as it might sound for kids that are 2 to 6 years old to engage that way. So that's been a challenge. The other thing is just wearing a mask. One thing we've done that we've offered to staff is like a clear mask. There's actually an FDA approved mask called the clear mask, which is like a plastic component that's translucent, but still effective as a mask. So that's one thing we've offered to try to enable kids to at least see expression and begin to, just get more comfortable with our staff. Because our staff is trying to develop a rapport with the kids, and if they're wearing a mask and you can't see the emotion, you can't. And again, sensing emotions and the social skills elements is a a challenge in autism, and so that's another issue that we've tried to overcome, at least by using like an alternative mask. And then, we've had to make other changes that, are hard for parents. We opened our center and not a single parent has been in the center. So we have a policy that's curbside drop off and pickup, and that we're not doing any tours or letting in any visitors. It's really just the staff and the kids that are allowed in to kind of mitigate the risk of spreading COVID. And so that's been hard to convey that to parents. I think it's a huge vote of confidence that that we have as many clients as we have, even though the parents haven't even been able to come in and see. But we're also really eager to show them as soon as we can, because we think we've built a really nice program and it's really awesome for the kids. We want to showcase that as well. But that's also been a challenge, of just telling families that this is kind of the new normal. This is the way that we have to operate, and no, I'm really sorry. Like, I know you want to see the space, but we can't let you in at this time. So those are some things just kind of on the client side. And then I think on the staff side, it's really about safety and just ensuring that people remain healthy and we don't have an outbreak in our center. I think that's the biggest thing on our minds. And so I guess the challenge is just doing what we can to avoid that. So tons of sanitizer all over the place, requiring masks, requiring distancing. And by the way, we're also building a culture from the ground up during this time, which means we can't go out as a team the way we normally would. We, can't engage with each other the way we normally would. I think despite that, we've I think, done a good job of bringing in the right people that are starting to build a good rapport. But that's also been a challenge. Like, how do you build a culture for an organization when you have to modify your behaviors so much from the way you normally would build, a relationship with someone else?
Yeah, those seems like tremendous challenges, and it's incredibly impressive that you're finding ways to kind of tackle them and overcome them. Very cool, and bringing a lot of people very needed development in a crucial time. So you should feel really good about that. I'm wondering though, if you can go back to January, thinking about like what you could tell yourself to potentially help out this process. Would you tell yourself anything differently? I know you've had so many milestones during this period and you've built it up a lot during this period, but I'm wondering if you can kind of go and tell yourself something then.
Yeah, I mean, like, less on the COVID front, I'd say. Just, we're a new practice, and I'm just honestly, candidly, a new CEO, right? So I'm constantly learning and needing to evolve the way I interact with people, the way I make decisions, the systems I use to get through a day, taking notes a certain way, emailing a certain way, whatever. And I think it's been the whole thing has been this major evolution of the way I live my life and what my priorities are. And I think if I could go back in time, I just would force myself to have more structure. I think one of the things that as a business leader that I've struggled with is, some of the things that made me successful in private equity in my other roles are not the same things that allow you to be successful when you open up a center and a second center. And, we have plans to open a third and fourth by Q1 of 2021. And, it's just not the same. Those are just, you need completely different ways of operating, in my mind, to get those things done. And so I would have probably implemented certain systems and structures that just like made that a little bit easier for myself. And so I just, again, I know it's a little nebulous what I'm saying, but I continue to evolve, and I think where I'm at and the way that I operate will look a lot different in 1 year than it does right now, and it looks a lot different now than it did back in January.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to be most important for your business as you go forward? I know you said you're opening a couple of centers.
Yeah, I think the biggest, most important thing for us, it comes back to our mission of providing a high standard of care to the kids that we serve and their families, is just bringing in the right team to make that happen. So I think it's all going to be on the human resources side, continuing to build a great culture with the team that we already have. We're all rowing in the same direction. We're all really excited about our mission and getting better at what we do, learning, growing, and then bringing on new people that can help, realize that as well. So that's additional clinicians, additional therapists, and training them appropriately and to a high standard. Those are going to be our biggest challenges. Obviously, like this labor market makes it, on the margin, somewhat easier to bring people onto your team. But I think keeping the standard of care really high means that doesn't help us so much. We really have to be very selective with the people we bring in, that they mesh with our culture, that they're really motivated and mission driven like we are, and we feel like they can make a difference. So I think that's going to continue to be the biggest thing. There are other areas that we need to execute on, but I feel like the human resources part is really the most important, and is what I try to think about most in terms of making sure we really excel in that area.
Yeah, I think all businesses is so much about the people, so that makes a lot of sense. So it's pretty amazing how you have been able to like shift your entire life, like focus. You went to business school in undergrad, then went to business school for an MBA, and then you were back in private equity. And I know you've talked about your sister influences and your dad and grandfather influences of medical. And I'm wondering, what do you think really inspires you, and like maybe a combination of things, like who or what is like allowed you to make this giant shift in your life? And you can talk more about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it all stems from, well, having like the most supportive family, parents and friends. Like I'm exceedingly lucky to have that. Like if you don't have that, I think it's really hard to have the confidence and faith and support that you're gonna, if you go off and do your own thing, that you're gonna be okay. So I have that. I think that was helpful. But really what has inspired this whole thing is my sister. Like she, from the just very beginning, has just completely shaped my worldview, how I see the world, right? My perspective, knowing just how lucky I am, and you are, and just everyone that doesn't have the challenges that she has. And it just has been like the biggest influence on me, from day one. That was the influence throughout my entire career. Just, I think part of what I think pushed me to try to excel and work hard was that I had been given the gift to be able to do that, and that I just needed to put in every ounce to take advantage of that, frankly, miracle that I had been able to do that. And I think in seeing again this opportunity, this insight that frankly I felt ashamed that I hadn't even realized prior to reading that book. Once I had that insight, it was just no looking back. It was just so obvious to me that that was the way I needed to lead the rest of my life. And so normally I think a wholesale change in your career path would be, really jolting and like a complete, shock to the system, right? To like completely uproot that. But for me, it was so natural. I was convinced that was the right path for me. I had tons of motivation and passion behind it and wanting to do that. I'm able to summon energy towards what I'm doing in ways that I've never been able to towards other initiatives that I've had in life. And so it's just been something that I don't regret at all, and has been just really easy, frank. I mean, this has been the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but it's been an easy decision to live with, and easy to push myself to try to make Stride, a success, and to make Stride deliver the kind of impact that we want it to, because, it's just so a part of my being, right, is to kind of do something that helps people like my sister, and to kind of support families like ours. And so it's just a really cool opportunity that I had that insight, that I read that book, and that I'm on this path.
That's awesome. And definitely lucky to have the family that you have, it sounds like. And you and your sister are very lucky to have each other. So
Thank you.
On a separate note, we've been asking many of our guests here that there's a lot of dual issues going on in America today, with racism also playing a very important part of the dialogue and how businesses are interacting. And I'm wondering, how is this impacting your business, and what kind of things are you doing to help with that process?
Yeah, great question. I think a few months ago, when I heard helicopters above my head, every day, and we were in the Lakeview area here, and there were a lot of rioting and things like that. I mean, this was really top of mind. I think it continues to be an incredibly important issue, and something we think a lot about at Stride. So I think, first of all, it's in our DNA, I think, to like help people that just help everyone, frankly. Like autism, it doesn't discriminate. So, every race, every socioeconomic class, every religion is impacted by autism, and it's all of the globe. It's not like a U.S. issue or a challenge like that happens only here as well. So in terms of serving our clients, we have a very diverse client base, again, by race, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic class. And we're excited about that opportunity that like our clients are that diverse. I think it's really neat to be able to have a service that can help such a broad range of people. And then I think one thing, that we've done, because we acknowledge that we all have blind spots. I think that's a huge thing that I think I think I sort of knew prior to kind of Black Lives Matters, but it's like even more paramount for me now of like, I have blind spots and we all do. And if you grow up in an area where there isn't as much diversity, or even if you do, like you have blind spots. So one thing we do as part of our onboarding for all of our staff is a cultural competency training, which it's a couple hours where we expose them to a training related on this topic. So which should help people kind of spot some of those blind spots and and better serve our clients, because again, our clients are super diverse, and so we want to be thoughtful about how we interact with them. And then another thing that we do as a company is provide accommodations in certain cases to, for example, one thing we've done recently for a family that speaks Arabic actually is provide translator services to them. So this is a family that the parents just do not speak, English is a second language, and while they can speak some English, it's really a challenge, especially for an initial assessment when our clinicians in the home, in their environment, and we're trying to better understand the circumstances of their child and their family. So we've, go out of our way to bring on a translator for them to make sure that happens. So this, I don't know if that gets to race, but it talks about how we think about difference in our client base and how we want to make sure that we, provide the best outcomes in light of our differences. And then, from a staff standpoint, the reality is, the field that we're in is a predominantly white female driven field, or not driven, but that's the predominant kind of workforce. And so we are actively working on trying to diversify our staff and bring in people of all backgrounds. And our clinical director in particular is very focused on this, and just doing what we can to, have a just more diverse team page. If you go to our website, I mean, I'll just admit that it is a lot of white females that are on our page. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that and to say, what can we do to try to recruit other people into our group and provide a more diverse work environment that ultimately, leads to better outcomes for our families. Because again, our families are very, very diverse as well. So these are things that we think a lot about, and we have more work to do on it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think everyone does have more work to do, and that's kind of the point. Very cool. So I'm thinking about now asking you if you could tell yourself something 5 years from now, or really want to take away from this pandemic. If you can, there's obviously a lot of good that's happened for your business during this period, and personally, you've probably gone through a lot. What would you want to take away from this pandemic to kind of help you move forward 5 years from now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I wish I had more time to think about an answer to that question, but I think one of the main things is just you need to be prepared for the things you can't prepare for, and to just constantly just be aware that the world can change. The world is a fragile place, and what you think yesterday, your worldview, your truth yesterday might not be the same tomorrow. And it's really difficult to prepare your business for something like COVID. But I think if you're thoughtful about sort of unknowns and making sure that you don't introduce undue risk into your business, you can kind of get through time periods like this. One thing that I think we'll be very thoughtful about, going forward, as we grow, is like, what does our, just from a, it's like maybe it's my finance background, I'm thinking about this, but what does our capital structure look like? I think I'd be very hesitant to have a lot of debt on this business. I think, when COVID hit, most of the other players in this space, and we're fortunate in a way that we didn't have lots of centers and we didn't have, a lot of debt on our balance sheet at that point, but a lot of providers did. A lot of providers had that circumstance, and a lot of their clients just went home and they stopped getting services. And so, revenue dried up and they were in a really tough position. And so I think just being really cautious about that and being able to weather the storm like this is something that, I'm acutely aware of now, having, seen what's happened to other people and having, sort of lived through this moment. I think we'll always be really risk averse because of that. And I guess in a way it's a good lesson in that sense. So, it's a terrible thing that's happened, but yeah, I think we should walk away with lessons like that.
You talk about being risk averse, and that's interesting. And the way people kind of interact with that idea is kind of like there's a lot of ways to like interact with risk and your tolerance of risk. So I'm wondering, as a last question, last words of advice that you can either give to yourself and probably also to other business owners as they think about how they're going to move forward. I know you kind of talked about a lot of the ways that you already kind of addressed in the last question, but are there any other words of advice you give to business owners as we all move forward?
I just like doing your best. I mean, you can only do your best right now, and you should, don't have any regrets about putting your best foot forward. This has been a really tough time for everyone. And I think if we just continue to do the best we can, something my grandma used to say, do your best. I think then we won't have regrets about the way we handled ourselves and our outcomes. So I continue to try to do that, do my best each day. Every day is tough. Every day is a new day. But looks like we're around a corner, hopefully pretty soon. I know that Chicago just got a whole bunch of, and all across the country, there's a lot of vaccines. So hopefully we'll get through this soon. And tomorrow will be a better day. Yeah.
That's I like to think about the song Annie, of like sing the song tomorrow. I actually listen to it sometimes. It's just like the sun will come out tomorrow. And that's like a really good idea with the vaccine literally coming out today. So wish for the best for tomorrow for everybody. And thank you for being here today on Restarting America. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thank you.
It's been really nice to hear your story, and wish you a lot of success in doing a pretty wonderful thing for the people you're helping out. So you should feel really good about that.
Awesome. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Restarting America podcast. Make sure to subscribe in your podcast app and visit restarting-america.com for more episodes like this one. Restarting America is produced by 97 Switch.